Imagine walking into a store you own, only to be treated like you don't belong. That's exactly what happened to Andre, a successful black CEO who went undercover in his own luxury store, only to be humiliated by a racist manager. What happened next left everyone stunned. And the manager? He got the shock of his life. Before we get started with today's story, let us know where you're tuning in from in the comments, and be sure to hit that subscribe button. Andre Williams sat at his desk in his office in downtown Atlanta, staring at the email on his screen. The words were simple, yet the weight they carried pressed down on his shoulders like a heavy stone. He'd built his luxury retail chain, Vera Lux, from the ground up, stores across the country, a symbol of opulence and high-end service. But lately, there were whispers, troubling whispers about one of his stores. And not just any store. It was one of the flagship locations in Miami, Florida. The complaints were consistent. The manager, Greg Coleman, had been turning away certain customers. He'd been making assumptions, judgments based on people's appearances. There was no direct mention of race in the complaints, but Andre knew. He always knew. Growing up in the south side of Memphis, Tennessee, Andre had experienced the same assumptions all his life. Now, as the CEO of one of the country's most prominent luxury retail chains, he thought he'd left those days behind. Yet, it seemed the same biases were alive within his own empire. Andre leaned back in his chair, fingers pressed to his lips. The disappointment simmered in his chest, the memories of being followed around stores, denied opportunities, being sized up for what he looked like instead of what he had to offer. He couldn't let it fester in his stores. Not in the brand he'd built to break down those exact barriers. If the rumors were true, Greg Coleman had to be dealt with, but Andre needed to see it for himself. He picked up his phone, calling his assistant. "Maya, clear my schedule for tomorrow," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm flying to Miami." The next morning, Andre stood in front of the Vera Lux store on Ocean Drive in Miami Beach. The sun beat down on his shoulders, and the sound of the waves crashing in the distance mixed with the hum of traffic. His reflection stared back at him from the sleek glass storefront. His usual polished suit traded for a pair of worn jeans, a simple t-shirt, and a baseball cap pulled low over his brow. His Rolex remained at home, replaced by a simple leather-banded watch. He was just another man on the street today. No signs of wealth or status. He knew how it felt to be ignored, how it felt to be looked at as though you didn't belong. And today, he'd walk into his own store to feel it once again. As Andre stepped inside, the cool air of the store rushed over him. Marble floors gleamed under the soft lighting, and the air smelled faintly of expensive cologne. Designer handbags and jewelry sparkled in glass cases, meticulously arranged to entice the high-end clientele. It was the kind of space that oozed luxury, but something felt off. Andre moved slowly, his eyes scanning the room. A few other customers wandered between the displays. One couple, obviously well off, were being attended to by a sales associate with enthusiastic eagerness. But as Andre drifted toward a case of leather bags, he noticed it. No one acknowledged him. Not a glance from the associates, not even from the security guard standing by the door. He picked up one of the bags, the leather soft under his fingers. It was a piece he'd designed himself, sleek, minimal, timeless. His eyes scanned the room again, and that's when he saw him. Greg Coleman, standing near the back of the store, dressed sharply in a tailored suit. Greg's gaze landed on Andre, his expression immediately turning hard. Here we go, Andre thought, steeling himself for what was coming. Greg made his way toward Andre, his footsteps slow and deliberate. When he finally reached him, there was no smile, no greeting, just a narrow-eyed glance at the bag Andre held in his hand. "Can I help you with something?" Greg asked, his tone clipped. Andre glanced up from the bag, meeting his gaze. "Just looking," he said evenly. Greg's lips pressed into a thin line. "Well, those bags are quite expensive," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable browsing over there," he added, nodding toward the back corner where the lower-priced items sat. Andre's jaw tightened. There it was, the assumption. Greg hadn't even bothered to hide it. In his eyes, Andre was just a guy off the street, someone who didn't belong in the luxury section. "I think I'll stick with this," Andre said, his voice steady. Greg folded his arms across his chest, eyeing Andre's worn jeans and t-shirt with obvious disdain. "Are you sure?" he pressed. "It's not the kind of store where people just browse." Andre set the bag down carefully, keeping his expression calm. He'd seen enough. "I'll let you know if I need help," he said, turning away from Greg. As he walked toward the door, he could feel Greg's eyes on his back, the weight of the judgment clinging to him like it always had. The next morning, Andre returned to the Vera Lux store on Ocean Drive, but this time, it was different. He was dressed in one of his custom-tailored suits, his polished shoes clicking on the pavement as he approached the glass doors. Inside, the staff were bustling with energy. Greg among them, his voice rising above the others as he directed the team in preparation for a big day. They had no idea what was coming. When Andre stepped through the doors, the atmosphere shifted instantly. The associates, who had ignored him the day before, were suddenly attentive, their eyes wide with recognition. Even Greg's confident stance faltered slightly when he saw the man he had dismissed as an unimportant customer now standing tall, radiating authority. "Mr. Williams," Greg greeted, his voice filled with forced enthusiasm. "Welcome to the store. I wasn't expecting you today." Andre smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "I'm here to see how things are running," he said, his tone casual. "I had an interesting visit yesterday." Greg's face paled slightly, but he quickly recovered. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. If there were any issues, I'll personally make sure they're resolved." Andre didn't respond immediately. Instead, he took a slow look around the store, noting how the staff stood at attention, eager to please now that they knew who he was. It was all a performance, and it was clear to Andre that Greg didn't truly grasp the seriousness of what had happened. "I'll be honest with you, Greg," Andre began, turning his gaze back to the manager. "What I experienced yesterday wasn't just a minor issue. It was a pattern of disrespect, based on assumptions." Greg's smile faltered, but he remained silent, waiting for Andre to continue. "You see, Greg," Andre said, his voice low but firm, "you assumed that because I wasn't dressed like your usual clientele, I didn't belong here. You treated me differently because of what you saw on the surface." Greg opened his mouth to protest, but Andre raised a hand, cutting him off. "I've been where you are. I know what it's like to face those assumptions every day. But I didn't build this company for people like you to bring those biases into my stores." The silence in the room was deafening. The other staff members stood frozen, watching the exchange with wide eyes. "So, here's what's going to happen," Andre continued, his gaze hardening. "You're not going to be fired, not yet. Instead, you're going to personally greet every customer that walks through those doors, regardless of what they look like. And you're going to serve them with the respect they deserve." Greg swallowed hard, his face flushed with embarrassment. "If you can't do that, then you won't be working here anymore," Andre said, his voice calm but firm. "And trust me, if you slip up even once, I'll make sure you're never in a position to treat anyone like that again." The days that followed were a test for Greg, and Andre made sure to keep a close eye on the store. The staff, too, began to change, their attitudes shifting as they saw their manager forced to treat every customer with the respect they deserved. The whispers of Greg's humiliation spread through the company, and slowly, the toxic culture that had taken root in the store began to unravel. Andre wasn't satisfied with just addressing the issue in one location. He knew that the problem ran deeper, and so he implemented a company-wide diversity and inclusion training program. Every manager, every employee was required to attend, and Andre made it clear that there would be no tolerance for discrimination in any form. Weeks passed, and the change in the store became more apparent. Customers who had once felt unwelcome began to return, and the staff who had once turned a blind eye to Greg's behavior started to take pride in treating everyone equally. Andre knew the fight wasn't over, but the progress was undeniable. When Andre finally returned to the store weeks later, dressed once again in casual clothes, the difference was clear. The same associates who had ignored him before now greeted him with genuine smiles, offering help without judgment. Even Greg, humbled by the experience, had learned his lesson. As Andre walked through the store, he couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. The battle against prejudice was far from over, but he had taken a stand in his own company, and that was a start. Respect, he thought to himself as he left the store, wasn't just a luxury, it was a necessity. And now, Vera Lux reflected that belief in every corner. Weeks passed since Andre had first confronted Greg, and the changes in the store were undeniable. The staff had shifted their behavior, treating every customer with a sense of respect and professionalism that wasn't there before. But Andre knew that lasting change required more than just a temporary shift. It needed to be woven into the very fabric of the company, something everyone, no matter their position, had to believe in. Greg Coleman, once so smug and sure of his place in the store's hierarchy, was now a different man. He wasn't just performing tasks out of fear of losing his job. There was a visible change in his demeanor. Every morning, Greg greeted customers with a smile, his posture less rigid, his eyes more open to the diversity of people walking through the doors. He had learned the hard way that assumptions were a dangerous thing. Andre, however, wasn't just content with changing one store. He had the whole chain to consider. After returning to his office in Atlanta, he immediately set up meetings with his executive team to discuss the implementation of diversity and inclusion programs across the company. Every location, from Los Angeles to Houston, Boston to Miami, needed to be aligned with the vision Andre had for Vera Lux. At their headquarters, the boardroom was filled with voices of concern, but also of hope. Andre listened carefully to each department head, making it clear that this wasn't just a training program to check off a list. It was a movement to change the entire culture of the brand. "There's more to this than numbers," Andre said as he stood at the head of the table, his gaze steady. "We're not just selling products. We're representing something bigger. Every customer who walks into one of our stores deserves to feel respected. That's what this is about." His words carried weight, and the room fell silent. Andre's executive team knew that this was personal for him, and none of them wanted to be the one to stand in the way of his vision. Maya, his assistant, raised a hand slightly from her seat at the corner of the table. "Andre, what you're proposing is significant, but how do we ensure that every store takes it seriously? Some locations have been doing well, but others, well, they're not all facing the same challenges." Andre nodded. "I've been thinking about that. The stores need to be held accountable. But more than that, the managers need to be on board. They need to believe in it, not just do it because they're told." The head of operations, a man named Frank, spoke up next. "We could tie performance metrics to customer satisfaction scores, include feedback from all types of customers. That way, if a store's numbers drop because of discriminatory behavior, we can address it immediately." Andre considered the idea. "It's a start, but it needs to go deeper. I want to hear from the employees themselves too. Anonymous surveys, feedback directly from the staff, not just the customers." Maya chimed in again, her voice steady. "And what about consequences for managers who don't comply? We need to make sure there's follow-through, that people know this isn't just lip service." Andre smiled slightly. "Greg Coleman's already learning that lesson, and I guarantee he's not going to forget it. But yes, consequences will be clear. If any manager can't uphold these values, they'll be replaced. No questions asked." The following week, Andre flew to Houston, Texas, for the official rollout of the new program. He'd chosen this city for a reason. The Vera Lux store in Houston had been one of the top-performing locations in terms of sales, but it had also received the most complaints about discriminatory behavior. When Andre arrived at the store, he noticed the same polished marble floors, the same luxurious displays, but the atmosphere was different here. It wasn't as cold as Miami had been, but there was still something off, a tension that hung in the air. The staff were polite, but there was a distance in their interactions, as if they were only doing what they had to do to get through the day. Andre greeted the store manager, a middle-aged man named Carl Jenkins. Carl had been with Vera Lux for nearly a decade, and he prided himself on running a tight ship. His numbers were always impeccable, but Andre had read the customer feedback, and more importantly, the employee feedback. And he knew there were deeper issues here. Carl greeted Andre with a firm handshake, his smile wide, but slightly strained. "Mr. Williams, it's an honor to have you here. We've been looking forward to your visit." Andre nodded. "I appreciate that, Carl. I'm here to talk about the new program we're rolling out. I'm sure you've heard about it." Carl's smile faltered slightly. "Yes, of course. I've briefed the team, and we're ready to implement whatever you need." "I'm glad to hear that," Andre replied, his tone calm but direct. "But I want to make something clear, Carl. This isn't just about implementing a program. It's about changing the way we think about how we treat people, customers and staff alike." Carl shifted slightly, his hands clasped in front of him. "Absolutely, Mr. Williams. I understand the importance of diversity and inclusion. We've always prided ourselves on being a welcoming place for everyone." Andre held his gaze. "That's what I want to see, Carl. Not just in words, but in action. I've read the reports from this store, and I've seen the complaints. People feel like they don't belong here, and that's not what Vera Lux stands for." Carl opened his mouth to respond, but Andre continued before he could. "This isn't just about fixing what's broken. It's about making sure every customer who walks through those doors feels like they're valued. That's what I expect, and that's what I'm here to enforce." Carl nodded, though Andre could sense the hesitation in his eyes. "Of course, Mr. Williams. We'll make sure everything is in place." In the weeks that followed, Andre made it a point to visit several other stores across the country, from Seattle to Dallas, each time observing the way customers were treated and ensuring that the new program was being implemented fully. The more stores he visited, the more he realized that the issue wasn't just about training. It was about changing mindsets, dismantling years of ingrained prejudice and bias that had gone unchallenged for too long. Back in Atlanta, Andre sat in his office once again, staring at the latest reports from the Diversity and Inclusion Program. The feedback had been encouraging. Stores were reporting higher customer satisfaction scores, and employees were feeling more empowered to speak up about issues of bias. But Andre knew the fight wasn't over. It would take time, effort, and persistence to keep pushing forward. One afternoon, Maya knocked on his office door, a stack of papers in her hand. "Andre, you're going to want to see this," she said, her tone serious. Andre gestured for her to come in. "What is it?" Maya handed him the papers. "It's the latest report from the Miami store. The numbers are up, and customer complaints are down by nearly 50%. But that's not all. Greg Coleman has been sending in regular updates on his progress." Andre raised an eyebrow. "Greg's been sending updates?" Maya nodded. "He's changed. From what I've heard, he's been taking the new program seriously. He's even taken it upon himself to train new staff personally, making sure they understand the values we're trying to instill." Andre smiled faintly. "I guess he's learned his lesson." Maya chuckled softly. "It seems so, and from what I can tell, the rest of the staff has followed his lead. The culture at the Miami store is completely different now." When Andre returned to the Miami store, the transformation was undeniable. The moment he stepped through the glass doors, he was greeted warmly by the staff, who offered genuine smiles and assistance without hesitation. Greg himself approached Andre, his demeanor humble and respectful, a far cry from the arrogant manager Andre had met weeks before. "Mr. Williams," Greg said, extending his hand. "It's good to see you again." Andre shook his hand, noting the sincerity in Greg's eyes. "It's good to be back. I've heard things are going well here." Greg nodded. "They are. I won't lie, it wasn't easy at first, but I've learned a lot. And I've realized that it's not just about the numbers. It's about the people, the customers, the staff. Everyone deserves respect, no matter who they are." Andre smiled, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. As Andre walked through the store, watching the staff interact with customers from all walks of life, he felt a sense of accomplishment. The journey had been long, and there was still much work to be done, but the progress was undeniable. The message was clear. Prejudice has no place in Vera Lux. It was a brand built on inclusion, on breaking down barriers, and now it reflected those values in every interaction, every customer, and every store. The weeks continued to roll by, and Andre's vision was taking root across all of Vera Lux. Employees from store to store were embracing the new culture, one built on respect and inclusion. But Andre wasn't naive. He knew this transformation required constant attention, a steady hand to guide it. His job wasn't over yet. In San Francisco, he faced another challenge. One of his busiest locations on Market Street had shown some resistance. The store manager there, Evelyn Harper, was an efficient leader, focused on numbers and keeping the store immaculate. But feedback from employees suggested that her laser focus on profits was at the cost of treating customers and staff fairly. It wasn't as overt as Greg's behavior, but the problem was there. Andre arrived at the San Francisco store on a foggy afternoon, casually dressed as he liked to be during these surprise visits. The store's polished look reflected Evelyn's attention to detail. Every display was perfectly arranged, the lighting soft but elegant. But Andre noticed something else too, a sense of rigidity among the staff, like they were walking on eggshells, afraid to make mistakes. He approached the jewelry counter, where a young woman was rearranging a set of diamond bracelets. She smiled politely, but didn't offer assistance until Andre asked. "Excuse me," Andre said, looking at the watches under the glass. "Can you tell me a bit about this collection?" The associate hesitated, glancing over her shoulder before leaning in. "Of course, sir," she said, but her voice was hushed, like she was nervous. "This is our latest line. They're all handcrafted and—" Her voice trailed off as she noticed Evelyn watching them from a distance. Andre followed her gaze, and sure enough, Evelyn was observing the interaction with sharp eyes. She didn't approach, but it was clear she was evaluating every move her employee made. "Is there a problem?" Andre asked gently, trying to ease the associate's tension. The young woman shook her head quickly. No, it's fine. She paused, stealing another glance at her boss. "I just want to make sure I don't mess anything up." Andre could feel the pressure she was under, and it wasn't right. He wanted to see more of how things played out, so he thanked her and moved through the store, noting the strained atmosphere everywhere. Associates were polite but distant, and there was no sense of warmth in their interactions with customers. It was clear they were more focused on keeping Evelyn satisfied than making the customers feel welcome. He decided to approach Evelyn directly, curious to see how she handled a casual conversation. "Good afternoon," Andre said as he walked up to her. Evelyn smiled stiffly, her posture ramrod straight. "Mr. Williams, it's an honor to have you here. We didn't know you'd be visiting today." "That's how I prefer it," Andre said with a light chuckle. "I like to see how things run when no one's expecting me." Evelyn nodded, though she didn't relax. "Everything is running smoothly here, I assure you. We've been performing above targets for the past 6 months." "I've noticed," Andre said, his tone neutral. "But I'm also hearing from some of your staff that they're feeling a lot of pressure. I've seen it myself just now." Evelyn's smile faltered slightly. "We're a high-performing store, Mr. Williams. There's always pressure to deliver." Andre met her gaze, his voice steady. "I get that. But what's important to me is how that pressure affects the way we treat people, both our staff and our customers." Evelyn hesitated, unsure of how to respond. She knew her numbers were good, but Andre wasn't here to talk about sales. "I want to make sure everyone in this store feels respected and valued, Evelyn," Andre continued. "From what I've seen, there's room for improvement. You have a talented team, but they seem more afraid of making mistakes than they are focused on providing a great experience for our customers." Evelyn's posture stiffened. "I run a tight ship, Mr. Williams. We don't tolerate errors here. It's how we've maintained our reputation." Andre sighed softly, choosing his next words carefully. I understand the need for efficiency, Evelyn, but there's a balance. It's not just about preventing mistakes. It's about making sure that the people working for you feel like they can contribute without fear. Evelyn pressed her lips together, clearly uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I'll take your feedback into consideration, she said after a beat, her tone clipped. Andre nodded, though he knew it would take more than a brief conversation to change her mindset. He would need to watch closely and follow up with the staff to ensure real change took place. Back at the headquarters in Atlanta, Andre gathered his executive team again. They discussed the ongoing rollout of the diversity and inclusion programs, but now Andre had another issue to raise. I've noticed something in some of our stores, he said, addressing the group. It's not just about direct discrimination. There's a culture of fear in some places, employees afraid to make mistakes, and that fear is impacting how they interact with customers. Frank, the head of operations, furrowed his brow. Are you saying this is tied to the managers? Partly, Andre said. Managers like Evelyn in San Francisco are so focused on keeping the numbers up that they've forgotten the human side of this business. We're not just selling luxury products. We're selling an experience. And that experience should make people feel good, not stressed. Maya, his assistant, spoke up. Maybe we need to include leadership training as part of the diversity program, something that focuses on emotional intelligence and how to lead with empathy. Andre nodded. Exactly. It's not just about hitting sales targets. It's about creating an environment where people can thrive, where customers feel welcome, and employees aren't constantly afraid of slipping up. The team agreed, and they began discussing ways to integrate leadership training into the broader diversity and inclusion program. Andre knew this would be another long road, but it was necessary. Real change wasn't just about removing overt prejudice. It was about building a company where everyone, staff and customers alike, felt valued. A few months later, Andre visited the San Francisco store again. He had implemented the leadership training, and he was eager to see if there had been any improvement in the atmosphere. As he walked through the doors, he immediately sensed a difference. The same young associate who had been so nervous during his last visit greeted him with a smile that was much more relaxed. She seemed more at ease, and the stiffness that had once plagued the store's atmosphere was gone. The staff moved with confidence, interacting with customers in a way that felt natural and welcoming. When Andre approached Evelyn, she greeted him with a much warmer demeanor than before. Her usual stiff posture had softened, and there was a new sense of humility in her tone. Mr. Williams, welcome back, Evelyn said, her smile genuine this time. Things have been going much smoother here lately. I can tell, Andre said with a nod. How's the leadership training working for you? Evelyn hesitated before answering, her expression thoughtful. Honestly, it's been a learning experience. I didn't realize how much I was focusing on the wrong things. I thought if the numbers were good, everything was fine. But I've started to understand that it's not just about the bottom line. Andre smiled. It's about people. Evelyn nodded. Exactly. I've been working on building trust with my team, and I think it's starting to show. Andre could see the change in her. The rigid manager who had once ruled with an iron fist was now someone who was learning to lead with empathy. It was a reminder to him that change was possible, even in those who seemed the most set in their ways. By the end of the year, Vera Lux had undergone a transformation, one that went far beyond profits and sales. The diversity and inclusion program had become a core part of the company's identity, not just something implemented in response to complaints, but a genuine effort to create a better environment for everyone involved. Andre knew the work wasn't done. There would always be challenges, always room for improvement. But as he walked through the Vera Lux flagship store in Atlanta, watching the staff interact with customers of all backgrounds, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was what he had envisioned from the beginning, a company where luxury wasn't just for the wealthy elite, but for anyone who walked through the doors. He had faced his own battles with prejudice throughout his life, and now he had built something that stood against it, Vera Lux was more than just a retail chain. It was a symbol of progress, a reminder that everyone deserved respect, regardless of where they came from or what they looked like. As Andre left the store, the sun setting over the city, he knew there was still much work to be done. But for now, he allowed himself a moment of peace, knowing that he had made a difference. Not just in his company, but in the lives of those who worked for him and the customers they served.